Hello everyone and welcome to the Zeitgeist Movement Podcast Australia. My name's Zach and we have a very special episode today because we are in Melbourne at the Zeitgeist Australia meetup and all the coordinators from around Australia have gotten together in Melbourne and we are planning Z-Day and also just catching up and hanging out and being Zeitgeisters. So I have with me today Matthew Hull from Adelaide and Michael Kubler from Adelaide as well. They're both coordinators and they'll both just give a little introduction about themselves. So Matt, can you tell me a little bit about how you got into Zeitgeist and what you do for the movement?
Yeah, thanks Zach. I got into the Zeitgeist Movement early 2015, so about 18 months ago. I came into the movement from probably not the same pathway that others come into it, in that I was probably considered a right-wing economically but socially progressive mindset or indoctrination, if you want to call that. And I just over time I had friends that would try to give me little snippets of information, little pushes, and eventually one day after watching a brief Russell Brand video about the fact that there's 88 people that have more wealth than 3.5 billion, something clicked in my mind that the world's insane. So then came across the Zeitgeist movies and have been very excited about it ever since. So yeah, and for the movement I help Michael coordinate in Adelaide and just looking to do what we can to expand the movement and grow the message.
And segueing on from that, Michael, can you tell me a little bit how you got into the movement and what you do for the movement?
Cool. So I remember watching Zeitgeist, the first movie many years ago on, that's okay. Nothing really to do, but Zeitgeist Addendum came out and I went, awesome, this is amazing. And then the first Z-Day came around and there was no chapter, there was no event happening in South Australia. So I went, I'll start one. And from then on, I was running the SA chapter until other people with better organisation skills came along, and I let them take over. Matt was just giving a no. What was that about?
That's I don't have the greatest organisational skills, but I'm good at talking shit, which helps sometimes. So.
Yeah.
Well, the purpose of this Australian-wide Zeitgeist meetup is to organise the Z-Day main event in Brisbane, Australia on the 25th and 26th of March 2017. And this is an extremely exciting event. We hope it's going to be the biggest and most successful Z-Day ever. It's going to be 2 days. We have a band. We have many presenters. Peter Joseph is coming. And we've been working tirelessly. It's about 6 months out now, just to get the funding together, getting the organisation together, the schedule. And in part, that's what this meeting down in Melbourne was all about, bringing all the Australian coordinators together, connecting our communities so that we can network and actually make this happen as an Australian-wide chapter. So we've all been working on different things. What have you guys been working on in making this happen? Because I saw, Michael, this afternoon you were working on a little quiz that was going to be for the people who wanted to get a free ticket to the event. Would have to show that they are really Zeitgeisters if they wanted to get in for free.
Just a little couple of interesting questions to ensure someone's probably watched the movies or have an understanding of the Zeitgeist movement and some of the people involved and that sort of thing. So with a couple of fun little extras in there.
Mm. And helping Casey and the guys just work through the logistics side of the event. I think you don't get a full appreciation when you're, if you're tuning into an event like this, just how much work's actually had to go into it until you start to look at doing it yourself. So kudos to everyone that's put one on to date. But really looking forward to hopefully creating the best Z-Day ever to date.
And we are trying to do as much work as possible to make it free and available to those who can't afford it, and also give the opportunity for those who want to make a donation, because we do need to raise about $20,000 to $25,000 to make the event really possible, fly all the international guests in and so on. We need to raise money, but we want to do this in the most ethical way possible, because for those who are aware of what the Zeitgeist Movement is about, it's all about getting away from the monetary system, making everything not measured in dollars, not being inherently corrupted by using the monetary system. So we've had a few little discussions about how we can make the ticketing possible, where people can come for free and then others can donate, and international people who want to support us can buy a phantom ticket and just donate money that way. What do you guys think about the ethics of the Zeitgeist Movement? How do we raise money? How do we do all this? Maintain the integrity of the movement, but still get shit done so we can put on the best Z-Day ever?
Yeah, it's interesting, because I don't... Traditionally, if you're going to run an event for any type of organisation, you would normally get some corporate sponsorship, and for that right, they would have their branding shown and all those kinds of things. And really, in order to preserve the integrity of the movement, I think it's really important that we can't do that, because if we're saying a message in line with the values of what the Zeitgeist Movement is, and that is not in line with a sponsor's message, then you can really run into trouble. So avoiding that, I think, is paramount. And so it really is about, there's a lot of people around the world that's aware of the movement, and a lot of people that are more well off than others within this system. And so I think those that understand it and have the ability to put more in than others, I think will do so willingly. And equally, those that can't put anything in, there's no right to feel bad about that, because that's the system we're in, and we want to make it open and available for everyone.
Yeah, the Casey had mentioned in her presentation last night something about money and how do we walk the talk and that sort of stuff. And I know I pulled her up semantically, saying, look, we're not trying to live without money. We're trying to transition to a world where we no longer need money. So some people I've seen get quite annoyed at the fact that we talk about money. It's like, well, and that we need it in order to do this. It's like, yep, we're living within a monetary system. We're trying to transition away from it. We're still going to need money at the moment. And one of the big things at the moment for us is more of a cash flow issue, where most of the tickets aren't going to be sold until a week or two before the event. But we need to, the earlier we get the money to pay for flights, the cheaper they are. We need to have accommodation locked in, so all of those other bits and pieces. It's just the reality of it. So if we need to do some fundraising, crowdfunding beforehand and those sorts of things, it's just we're hoping that Geisters will chip in and help make that a thing. And part of it we were talking about is, if we do end up with a surplus of money, then we could start putting that into a revolving funding pool, where other events that need effectively a interest-free loan of sorts to get stuff happening can pull out from that that pool. Because
it is a global movement, and we will not have the main event of Z-Day here again. Maybe it'll be somewhere else in Europe or so on. They will need a chunk of money to get the ball rolling, and then when they do sell tickets or raise money, however they do, then they can pay on to the next Z-Day, and then hopefully it'll just get bigger and bigger, and people won't have to worry about money. This is part of the transition, in fact. Making a surplus so that we can actually not worry about money and just organize the event to make it as cool as possible. Because, as you were saying with the sponsorships, there is an inherent moral hazard, because they're a sponsor. They are a business. They are selling a product, and we are selling an idea, and that idea is completely contradictory to the idea of selling a product, because our idea is we don't want to sell products anymore. We don't want to sell anything anymore. We don't even want a monetary system.
I look forward to the day when the word sell is no longer in the dictionary. That would be nice.
It's been archived away.
Yeah.
Yes. So talking about that revolving funding model, I guess, and something that's not quite Zeitgeist related, but showing the power of using money in an effective way, I'm part of a group called CORENA, the Citizens Owned Renewable Energy Network Australia. And so if you're talking about renewables and climate change and all of those sorts of things, then there's a few things you can do with your money. You can pull money out of banks and divest, but you can also invest. And what we do with CORENA is, especially with the quick win funds, you donate money into that pool of money that look at different non-profit organisations like community centres and places that own a building or run a building, and they're paying for electricity, and let's say they're paying $600 a month for electricity. We give them an interest-free loan to set up a, say 10 to 20 kilowatt solar PV system, and also things like energy efficiency, lighting, all of that sort of stuff, to reduce their bill, and they pay us the savings difference to pay off the loan. So they get interest-free loan, bam, pays off over a few years, and that money then goes to paying another solar PV installation. So I'm donating to CORENA, and I don't get an investment back, I don't get money back, but that is one of the most effective forms of reducing CO2 emissions and everything else, because if I say, put in enough money to buy a solar PV panel, then after a few years, that then goes and funds another solar PV panel and another one. And so over the course of 40 years, you might end up, from just the cost of one panel, having actually funded 10 of them. So, and I can see how the Zeitgeist Movement can have similar setups with sustainable communities and other things in a broader sense, where, okay, we put some money in and consider it a donation, but it's actually us transitioning into an R.B.E.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point, Michael. There's lots to be done and learnt from in business. I think there are still some ethical businesses out there, and I would be happy for them to advertise at Z-Day, because if we're promoting something that is fundamentally good, then I'm in full support of that. I just don't want the purity of the message to be contaminated with marketing. So I think if we could find something like that, a solar panel company or a 3D printing company or something like that, a company that is about the future and technology and is part of the transition, then I would really like them to actually contact us, and if we could work out a deal where they could advertise at Z-Day, they could spread awareness about their product, and we could spread awareness about our ideas, and we could work together, because that's what the Zeitgeist Movement is ultimately about. It's about, instead of competition, it's about collaboration. And if we work together, we're more efficient. And if we're more efficient, we will outcompete the current system. And that's how I think we actually destroy the current system, is not by competing against it, by making more efficient systems within the current system that will outcompete it and make the old system obsolete, and it will just collapse because it's no longer necessary.
Yeah, that's what I call the price of zero transition, which I'd love to speak at Z-Day about. So.
Yes, well, do you want to give the listeners a quick taste? Because you gave the coordinators yesterday a quick taste with your presentation about the different ways that the Zeitgeist Movement aims to transition from the current system to a resource-based economy.
Yeah, so just a quick one. If you've seen a lot of the Venus Project stuff, often what you hear is what I call the Phoenix model, or the price of infinity, and that is that we have to wait for the current system to collapse before we can build a new system. The issue is you have no resource, you have no internet left, you have no access to transport, all of those things that you need to have go and create a nice sustainable community. Effectively, the price of everything is just too high. What I'd like to see is a transition and collapse of the system is we go and create a number of sustainable communities that are based around automation and sustainability and abundance, and are creating an excess of food, water, electricity, transport, education, entertainment, like all the necessities of life based around the scientific method there. So they're creating that abundance and are able to sell that off to the existing monetary system at cheaper and cheaper prices. So internally, they're not using money, but they're going to need to acquire some resources from the existing system. And by going through that process, you're just spreading the more and more sustainable communities around the place. And once you get to the point that you're providing things for free, all those necessities for free, that's the price of zero collapse, that you no longer need money.
But I think it will be the other side, the price of infinity. There's going to be a part of that happening as well in that in the outside world, in the other. So we all know in talking to people that are not currently aware of the movement or aware of the values, that people are quite often aren't just ready to hear this kind of stuff. They're comfortable. A lot of people are comfortable. A lot of people are not comfortable. But certainly in a country like Australia, a lot of people are relatively comfortable, and it's too much to think about, and they want to get on with their day job and then get on with their weekend and get on with their night out. And so there's a part where you say the price of infinity, that has to happen to a degree, maybe approaching infinity, where things have to get worse in order to say, to venturize it and say, hey, now I understand something's wrong, now I'm going to look at what's causing it, now I'm going to look at alternatives. So I see the two somewhat working in parallel. I think the other side, back to the price of zero side as well, is that if these communities are growing and it's working, as you say, we have to acknowledge the counter-revolution, for want of a better word, of the existing power structure to break that apart. Mm-hmm. Which leads me to one of the things I'm really interested in, which is, and it's possibly very naive, I think, as we've spoken about, but somehow getting the existing power structure to understand what overall we're trying to do, and create almost like an exit strategy for them to see if they can comprehend it, given their current worldview and given their current environment. If they can comprehend it and see how, yes, in 20 years, if we don't move to what you're saying, we're stuffed as well, then I think if they can see that, then you could work with them on a kind of exit plan. That you never lock up Bush for going to Iraq. You never do these things because they were just a product of the environment as well. And so it's creating that kind of, that clemency.
Yeah. You've raised a point there of, you feel like there's a need for the price of infinity type collapse for some people, because what's almost instinctual there is that people are happy now and they're not going to transition to something new until they're in a situation where they're no longer happy with the current, so that they have to move. And I heard a great explanation of this phenomenon, and it's just, okay, you're in a building, you're happy in the building, and suddenly there's a building that's on, and you're asked to walk along a plank to another building, and it's 10 stories high and it's a small plank. You're like, why would I do that? I'm not going to do that. Then the building's on fire. So your building's on fire. You only have a limited time, and that's what we're saying with the price of collapse is going. Shit, I have to run across that plank. If I fall to my death, it's better than burning to death or whatever. I'm going to crawl. I'm going to do whatever I can to get across. The price of zero transition is saying, okay, the building's not on fire, but the plank is also not 10 feet high and small. It's actually on the ground, and it's a paved road, and it's really easy and really nice, and it's 10 times easier to go across.
I really like this discussion because the Zeitgeist Movement gets criticized a lot for not having transitional plans, but to me, that's not what our primary concern is. The Zeitgeist Movement is about bringing together people who agree on two fundamental things. Where we are in this current society and its trajectory of where it's going, which is generally considered to be a very bad place environmentally, and also where we would like to be. And when we have those two pieces of information, where we are and where we'd like to be, we can make a trajectory of where we'd like to go, and we can make intermediate steps for that transition. So we get criticized because we don't have the complete transition plan worked out yet, but that's what the Zeitgeist Movement is for and is about. It's about bringing people together who agree on at least those two things, so we can all work collaboratively to work on that transition plan.
You explained it really well with the fact that it's almost like there's a fog of war, and we know that we can see a mountain over in the distance, and that's where we want to go towards, and we know the next 10 steps we're doing, but we don't know exactly how we're going to get all the way to that mountain. We might have to go around buildings and do all of that. There's obstacles in our way. So we don't know the entire 100,000 steps, but every 10 steps you know what the next 10 steps are going to be. So we have enough information and we can be developing as we go.
And I think they become the two things that we're doing, isn't it? Is one thing is we are searching for exactly how the transition might work and constantly coming up with new barriers that might come up to work through how to overcome them. And on the second side it comes back to the awareness piece. And so much of what I spend my activism on personally, even just in my day-to-day life, is just trying to spread information, a mixture of existing negative information that people maybe aren't aware of, at the same time positive information about how things can be. So it's certainly a way to make you feel better about you have to go to you're going to your job, you have to get money to live, you know that your particular job is not potentially making a difference at all in a transitional sense, but at the same time, if you can do those other things, then I think sleep better at night, I guess.
I spend a lot of time thinking about transition, and in general, I try to always maintain focus on what to me are the key elements to consider when thinking about a transition. One is urgency. I think the great majority of people do not realize the urgency because they continue to think in linear terms, and they are not. They don't understand what exponential growth is, and at which point we are, and we are in the midst of an explosion of environmental damage and population. In the midst, it's not going to take more than 50 years to achieve disastrous proportions, and 50 years is a very short time frame for cultural change. So the sense of urgency is what keeps me. It's what gets me up in the morning and what keeps me awake at night and thinking, well, there's no time to lose, and we can't continue just debating things or thinking. We really need to act now, not in a crazy way, in an organized way, but there's no time to lose. And also knowing that people tend to be guarded and selfish when it comes to lifestyle. No one wants to. It's not no one. There are people like us who have greater sense of altruism, maybe.
If anyone was wondering who this new profound voice is on the podcast, this is Ziggy, our Sydney coordinator, and he just came up the wood ladder into the attic. We're in an Airbnb in Melbourne all together. We've got pitched roof above us, and we're sitting on the floor in the carpet around the laptop, and we're just zeitgeisting hard all weekend. So Ziggy, you just came onto the podcast. You just made us a beautiful vegan breakfast of scrambled tofu. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved with TCM?
Sure. I became involved with TCM about 6 years ago, in 2010. I happened to be David Zolski's neighbor. David was the founder of Zeitgeist Australia chapter, and he was the force that brought Jacques Fresco and Peter Joseph in 2010 for the premiere of Zeitgeist Addendum. And it's a really funny story. I got one of the DVDs he used to send to people who requested a DVD by email. So the address was wrong, and it came back to my mailbox instead, and it didn't have any information. So I just watched the DVD, and I really wanted to get involved, and I went to a Zeitgeist meetup, and when it ended, I decided to start chatting with the guy who seemed to be the coordinator, and I invited him to give him a ride. And where do you live? I live in this place. Oh, me too. and so then he was my neighbour. And since then I became really involved in Zeitgeist Sydney, and when he moved overstate, I took over the Sydney chapter for a while, and then the chapter stopped having activity for quite a while. I just very recently re-engaged with it. So I think people like us are altruistic in the sense that we are willing to compromise on our own comfort and security for the sake of the comfort and security long term of the human race. And this is not the case of the great majority of people, and that's understandable, and that's simply the way it is. So I think that when thinking about a transition plan, we have to consider that people need to be lured with something that is more convenient to them than what they currently have. And we have to focus, I believe that our main focus when thinking about a transition is thinking about something that is realistic and appealing, and that addresses the main concerns of the vast majority of people, which may be things like getting out of the rat race, so compromising on comfort, being less comfortable but enjoy a greater freedom, or realize that they have become very isolated in large cities and they have no friends, or the relationships are meaningless, and lure them with a very intense and rich social life. And well, this is my proposal.
That's a fantastic point, and that's something really important to bring up. Is I've been studying game theory a lot, and people generally do what is the most optimal decision, even if they're subconscious of the decision they're making. So the example you were giving before, Michael, about the person being in the building and there's a plank across to another building, you are not going to make a decision that is inherently risky to walk across a plank to another building if there is no reason to. You would only do that if your alternative is actually worse. If the building's on fire, then you will do it. So we have two ways of doing it, as you alluded to earlier.
Or if your building is currently really boring and the other building, there's a fantastic party.
Yeah. So we can do it in two ways. We could wait and let the building catch more and more on fire and make the incentive of moving across better because the current situation is worse, or we can make what we're moving across to better and more attractive, and then they will move across for that reason. But people will ultimately make predictable decisions. So I believe it is our job as like early adopters to either make people more aware that the current system is detrimental to them, that they don't have many friends, that their life isn't that great, that chasing money is not the route to happiness, that if you show them what their life really is, that they are essentially a wage slave and that their life has very little meaning, and you are offering an alternative to have meaning, to have friends, to have connection, you will forego some things like security, like comfort, but ultimately it is a much richer and more enjoyable lifestyle. People will make that transition because it is net benefit to them. They will do what is better for them. Even if they are doing an altruistic thing, it is ultimately a game theory decision where it is about self-interest at some level.
So what can get in the way of that, though, is, as we all know, is that cognitive dissonance, and the refusal to believe the rules of the game board, and to hold one side. So do we have, not to become the presenter, but do we have strategies around different things that we use to overcome cognitive dissonance? Is there something that you do in your conversations?
You're saying people who've been especially exposed to Murdoch Press and other mainstream media and that sort of stuff, and buy in as their identity is tied. The last 60 years they have been working hard and they're finally retired and they've done all of that. They've got the nuclear family, and why would they transition across?
They've invested so much in the game, and then you're saying the game is invalid. They don't want to believe it because they've invested so much time and energy.
So the technique there is you don't start with them. You start with those who want to. So we're the early adopters who can see the potential even without there being anything physical there. There's nothing tangible for us to see.
We've never seen a resource-based economy, and a resource-based economy has never existed, at least not a global one. So how do we even know it's possible? We just, there's a certain level of believing in the model because it is so well organized and so logical that we believe it even though we haven't seen it.
I need to trial it. This is something that Jacques Fresco has been talking about for at least a decade. Trial an R.B.E. with a first implementation. However, Jacques Fresco's visionary approach would cost maybe $100 billion to build, and would allow for maybe 1 million people in there. So who would invest so much money?
So you need to start with 150 people, and then work out how to double that, and then work out how to get to 10,000 people, and then you can look at 100,000 people and stuff.
But here's the paradox. In my mind, a resource-based economy can't work unless it's global, because if you have a resource-based economy in one city and a non-resource-based economy in another city, the non-resource-based economy, whose part of their premise of their society is competition, will see that as a competitor and destroy them.
But what about the settlements, the resource-based economy settlements grow at an exponential rate in such a way that the system, the capitalist system, cannot catch up with fighting it off. It just continues growing and growing because the proposal is so appealing and so accessible that people leave in droves. They don't even worry about selling their house. They just go to trial this thing for a month maybe, and they fall in love and they stay for little money because it's become suddenly so popular, and it's adopted everywhere. It becomes cheaper and cheaper to actually adopt it, until the only ones who remain in the cities are the ones who have been accustomed to privilege, and they are living they were living the great life until they realize they have no longer support. They have no more servants. They can't buy stuff because there are no salespeople. There's no chain supply, and they would be sort of forced to adopt this new paradigm or starve.
Well, it'll be actually the Luddites, those people who so ideologically believe that they just will completely reject until to the end type thing. We might find different ways of being able to deal with them, but the first bit is not to worry about that. We know we don't have to worry about it until much, much later down the track. Our first thing is, let's get some small sustainable communities happening based around at least a mini R.B.E.
And what you were saying earlier about the fog of war kind of analogy, where we know the next 10 steps, we don't know the entire 100,000 steps in order to get to a resource-based economy, but we know the first step is network the existing early adopters and then find the low-hanging fruit, the activists who don't know about this idea, the other people involved in science and technology, network those people, and then just continue that process. Collect and network and organize, and then collect, network and organize until we do have everyone. And those people who are so ideologically opposed to whatever we're trying to do here, which is just make a better world for everyone, they will be one of the last people to adopt this system. And that's fine. We'll go for the low-hanging fruit and we'll work our way up.
And leverage the power of the internet and the open source software and hardware, things like the WikiHows and
open source ecology,
3D printer, the RIPRAP, and all sorts of exchange of a platform for exchange of ideas like libraries of different designs, and contribute back. And because the people adopting these communities would have so much time available to employ in their own creativity, they could become a powerhouse, highly networked powerhouse of inventiveness and collaboration and innovation.
I think that's all really good. I think we have to consider the fact it's not definitely going to happen.
There are no guarantees.
There are no guarantees here. I think we know where we need to go to, and we know where we are now is destined to failure. Is destined to collapse on a lot of different levels. But even knowing that, and taking those 10 steps and working through the next ones, there are no guarantees. I wouldn't even hazard to say what the chances are, but it's trying to change the whole world. You know, you've got to get this kind of thought process that we now have, which is considered radical or whatever it is. We need to make that mainstream, and it's a massive task. So I don't think our problem lies in working through how do we get the last 30% across. Our problem lies in getting from 0.0001 or whatever we are now to 3%. It's getting that big, because once it's got that, it's got the momentum and it will roll through. But we need to break through to that 2 or 3%.
Yeah, interesting you say that, Matt, because that's absolutely true. We do need to focus on the task at hand, and we can really get those 100,000 steps down to what is the next one step? What is the next 10 steps? And I think the next 1 or 2 steps is to produce more content to go out from Australia, because we need to show that every chapter around the world is producing content, and that's how other chapters around the world will know who we are and what we do. Is they hear us on the podcast and they go, oh wow, they think the same thing we do, let's call them, let's network with them, let's share resources with them. And that's what we're already doing with Z-Day. And that segues to my next point. Z-Day, next March, 25th and 6th of March 2017 in Brisbane, Australia. We are bringing together the biggest Z-Day ever, with the most presenters, the highest caliber presenters, and the most organization it's ever had. And we hope this will be a catalyst for an increase in change, that after this, that all the chapters around Australia and the world will be booming, like what happened after Zeitgeist Movement Forward came out. There is a need for an acceleration in this, because as Ziggy was saying, we are on a collision course with nature. There is a sense of urgency. We don't have a lot of time. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I agree. We're facing economic, environmental, energy crises.
Social.
Like we've got to basically change and thrive, or we stay and die.
Yeah, and I think one of those next steps as well is, and I don't know where this starts from, but I think what we're doing here in Australia with the chapters across in different states, really trying to work out how we can collaborate better together. I think equally on a global scale, the more we can work to create better framework and better systems of sharing and those kinds of things will give us the tools we need to really take that next big step forward.
And speaking of the tools that we have access to, it's unprecedented what tool we do have access to, the internet. That's how we all got together. You guys are from Adelaide, I'm from Brisbane, we're in Melbourne, the Sydney coordinators with us. We all got together because of the internet, and I think this is our amazing opportunity to use this tool to actually come together. There's obviously nothing like sitting face to face, what we're doing right now. It's great to get to know you guys in person, but now that we've established this connection and strengthened this connection, we can continue to collaborate even though we'll be thousands of kilometers apart. So one last thing I want to wrap up with is you were saying there was no guarantees, and I completely agree with you. There is no guarantees, and that's why it's really scary, because that's why it's so urgent. If there's not like another group of people absolutely dedicated doing this, if we don't do it, maybe no one will. Yeah. And with a resource-based economy, as I was saying before, it is a global endeavor. It has to be all in. And if we don't get it right, and get it right the first time, and it doesn't work, then we may not get another chance, and that might be the end. So we need to be very diligent and work very hard together to make sure that we do get it right, and we work together, and that we understand human nature, we understand the nature of the universe, and that we use all our science and technology to make the world a better place.
I can finish on a quote that aligns exactly to what you were just saying. It's a Bucky Fuller quote. It says, "If humanity does not opt for integrity, we are through completely. It is absolutely touch and go. Each one of us can make the difference.
Thanks, guys. It's been a great podcast.